are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. The only broadcasting network dedicated to ending the global war on drugs on iHeartRadio.
Tour behind him and all his hopes ahead, a pride that beat with his young heart for all the things he did. As he stepped off the airplane, he stooped and kissed the ground. He traded a war on foreign soil for one in his hometown. There was no love for the soldier limping back home from the fight. That old flag was stitched with more than blue and white, but we turned our eyes. The eagle cried.
Good day, folks. This is Al Byrne representing Veterans for Compassionate Care.
Michael Krawitz with Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access.
And we have our guest today. As always, we try to have a military veteran or their caregiver or someone that has a deep interest in the medical or legalization efforts surrounding cannabis, especially how that relates to our veterans. So today we have a veteran of the Vietnam War, a compatriot of mine. I think we were there about the same time, Governor. I was there in 70, 71. I think you were there in 69, 70. Please welcome Governor Jesse Ventura.
Great to be here. Actually, I didn't deploy until February of 71. I went in the Navy in 1969, but I spent well over a year just going through, basic and then A school, and then I went through BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL, Class 58. I got done with that. I went to 3 weeks of Army Airborne Jump School. Then I went to Sears School, Survival, Escape, Resistance, and Evasion. And then I went to what at that time they called SEAL Cadre, or Advanced Guerrilla Warfare, which was about 6 to 7 weeks in the Nyland, California desert, where you got with your platoon and you ran ops every night. And then I actually deployed February of 1971 for 9 months, and then came back, I think it was around November of 71. Spent another 6 months at home, and then deployed a second time for 8 months, July of 72 until March of 73.
So you did 2 tours in Nam. Was that as advisor or were you regular Navy there?
No. Actually, just one, because my second tour they had pulled us out already. I guess we were achieving peace with honor, and so I went to a bunch of other places. My second tour, I went to Korea, Philippines, a whole lot of places in Southeast Asia.
Well, thank you for your service, Governor. But we're here today to talk about your book, which is recently released.
Yep.
It's called Marijuana Manifesto, and you do have a co-author named Jen, Jen Hobbs, and there is also a foreword in the book by Mr. Steve Covey, who is a friend of mine, or he's not a friend, but he's a cohort of mine, and he's a great guy, and it's a great book. Mike and I have a couple of things we'll discuss with you about the veteran issue that we think that we need to discuss, make sure it's clear. But I was wondering if you could just start off by telling us why you thought this book was necessary, And while you put it together like you did, I found it very good. So you made a lot of good comments. You had some good political thoughts, and you backed it all up, chapter after chapter after chapter, with references and science, which is what Mike and I stand on. So if you could just give it all to us and go for it, we're listening.
Well, for me, of course, I'm 65 years old now, and I lived through the 60s and all that stuff, and for me, it came down to I had lost my quality of life. Life as I knew it would never be the same again, and in essence, I can unequivocally state that marijuana saved it. Someone extremely close to me developed epileptic seizure disorder and was seizing 3 to 4 times a week sometimes. And this person got put on 4 different pharmaceutical medicines by doctors. None of them worked. All of them had horrible side effects, and the seizures continued. So in desperation, we went to Colorado, and we got, quote, medical marijuana, which was for seizures was 3 drops under the tongue 3 times a day. The seizures immediately stopped, and now we don't have to go to Colorado because it's been what they call medical marijuana has been legal now in Minnesota, but with a great deal of restrictions on it. And because of these restrictions, what cost us $30 a month in Colorado costs us $600 a month in Minnesota for the same thing. And so, logically, I could probably make trips to Colorado and come out on the better end of the financial deal on the whole thing. But I can unequivocally state that now this person's been seizure-free for 2.5 years. That was when I decided to get into it and start creating this book along with Jen Hobbs. Still seizure-free, is completely off all pharmaceutical medicine, and I know there's other people out there suffering. I know there's other people out there being denied a natural substance that can cure and heal many medical conditions today, and we're being denied this by our federal government, who wants to act as our parent, who wants to tell us what we can or cannot use health-wise. They want to be able to do this, and they're now in a minority opinion because over 50% of Americans today say that all marijuana should be legal. And let me state this. The people that smoke marijuana for the high or the euphoric feeling, that is likewise medical because they're doing that for mental health. I would rather have somebody smoke pot than I would get put on Prozac or some other antidepressant pharmaceutical drug that has side effects to it where marijuana doesn't have many side effects to it. And it's a natural thing. It's organic. It comes from the ground. If you believe in God, then that means God created it. So what right do we have to destroy something God created if you believe in God? For all the religious people out there. And so, it goes on and on. And here's the real big point, and the point that I really opened my eyes in doing the research for this book, is that when you start reading the history of cannabis marijuana in the United States, you find out that today, if George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Ben Franklin were alive today, the DEA would be raiding them. They would be busted federally. They would probably all 3 be serving 10 to 12 years as major drug dealers because their major crop was marijuana. And marijuana, when you read the history, was the economic backbone of this country for its first 160 years of existence. In fact, you could barter with the British and exchange marijuana as opposed to money, and it was completely acceptable back in those days. Now you ask, what could have gone wrong? How could this generator that drove our economy for 160 years end up being bastardized today? Well, it's called William Randolph Hearst. He was the big paper or the big newspaper guy, owned 26 newspapers, and he also owned thousands of acres of timberland. Well, here's another tidbit for your listeners out there. The Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and Betsy Ross's original flag are all made out of marijuana or cannabis. So it's pretty all-American when you think of it, and you think of the creation of our country. But getting back to Hearst wanted to corner the market. Now, when you live in a capitalistic world, capitalism means competing. It means competing against other people in the economy. Well, Hearst was a capitalist, all right. He felt that the way to compete was to become a monopoly. So he did what they do today. He paid off the politicians in Washington. He used his 26 newspapers to put out that marijuana was a devil weed. He used racism completely, because let's remember back then, in the 30s and the late 30s, we were completely a governed white people country. Minorities were not even considered back then, pretty much. And so he blamed marijuana, the devil weed, on blacks. He used racism there, saying the blacks smoke it and they'll rape your wives and they'll rape your daughters. And I kid you not on what he said. He used it on Mexicans or brown-skinned people, claiming it was marijuana that made them all lazy. He capitalized on these supposed stereotypes of people of color, and he used that to perpetrate the myth and then finance a movie like Reefer Madness, which is the biggest joke you've ever seen, and the people bought it. And he then got paid off Congress, and they made marijuana hemp illegal, and we were then forced to buy his timberland to produce wood to create paper. And so that there you got a history very quickly of marijuana that you can read more in depth in this book, and when you do read about it, you'll be outraged over what they did to us.
Yeah, Governor, Mike Krawitz here. I often like to talk about the fact that the veterans that came back from World War I had access to cannabis. They could get a prescription for cannabis and go fill it at their pharmacy, but the World War II vets came back, the prescriptions were no longer, and the cannabis was taken off the pharmacy shelves. I'm wondering, since you came up in the interim since then, but before our modern medical marijuana movement, if you will, what was that like for you? I mean, how did cannabis or marijuana weave in and out of your life? Did it have any impact on you when you were in the service or when you were governor, the fact that cannabis was illegal and a prohibited substance?
No, it really didn't, I don't think. When I was fortunate when I came back in my military service. I was pretty healthy. I was well trained. I knew what I wanted to do and therefore, and did it. And so it never got to me, but certainly I grew up in the 60s. I still remember the date, July 25th, 1970. Now, why would that be an important day to me? I'll quiz you guys. July 25th, 1970. Why would I remember that here in 2016?
Yeah.
Well, that was the day I saw Jimi Hendrix live.
Okay.
And I still remember the date, July 25th, 1970. And so I grew up in the 60s. I grew up when marijuana resurged into the psyche of the young people. It came out of the Jack Kerouac era, the 50s and the beatniks, and really out of the Deep South. The black musicians, Satchmo himself, Louis B. Armstrong, one of the greatest people on the planet, said he smoked a joint every night before he played. He felt it made him play better. It got him relaxed, and it got him in tune with his music. So, and again, it was portrayed, all your great black musicians of the South, Muddy Waters on down the line of Howlin' Wolf and all those people, Robert Johnson, the great black guitar player whom Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, and all of them talk about, the great Robert Johnson, who allegedly sold his soul to the devil, is the story behind him. But anyway, marijuana then came out in the 60s strongly with the hippie movement and the anti-war movement. And of course, when the war ended, our country seems to be a country that has to be at war at all times. And I believe that today, being 65, because we've literally been at war my entire adult life, because when you count the war on drugs. Well, in 72, Richard Nixon got the bright idea to start the war on drugs, and thus it began. then became marijuana was being looked at in a different light, but all of a sudden it became criminal again. And what's interesting about it today...
Governor.
Yeah.
Governor, from your book, sir, you stay with Nixon a little bit, because in your book you quote Ehrlichman, right, about why really Nixon started this war. Could you just sort of give us the background there?
Well, I don't remember everything we wrote in the book. I can't quote Ehrlichman off the top of my head because the book's hundreds of pages.
The idea.
Yeah, go ahead. You quote him. If you know what Ehrlichman said, tell us, because it slipped my mind now. I don't remember what he said.
Okay. He was interviewed by an author named Scott Baum recently for an article in a magazine. And Scott has written in the past a wonderful book about the cannabis, the same stuff that the governor's talking about how the federal government has messed with cannabis over the years. It's called Smoke and Mirrors. But Baum went to Ehrlichman, and I can't quote him either, but what he basically said was that Nixon started the war on marijuana, or the war on drugs. It was really a war on marijuana. But it wasn't really a war on marijuana. It was really a pogrom. It was a pogrom against those that were anti-war, which you just brought up, and it was a war on the blacks. And he was just going to use the war on drugs to subdue those two groups. And damned if he didn't. But that's what
and so it's done by design, and marijuana was the excuse used, to wage war on black people of color, and then to wage war against any type of peace movement. And like we tie it into today, we got all these veterans coming back, and I like to proudly say I was opposed to the Iraq War before they even went in. And yet I was shut up. I don't know if you know my history on that. Would you like to hear it for a moment? It's interesting. I came out of office the hottest commodity out there. I was the independent governor from Minnesota, the voice of the independent. And Fox, MSNBC, and CNN got in a bidding war for me. MSNBC won. I signed a 3-year contract with them. I was supposed to have my own show 5 days a week. Well, they were trumping up the Iraq War at the time, and it came out to them that I opposed it. They immediately wouldn't allow me on the air. They had Phil Donahue on that time. They had brought him back. He opposed the war. He was taken off the air immediately. So there was no one out there speaking out against the invasion of Iraq, and it was done by design. I was under a 3-year contract, so in essence, I couldn't talk to any media or do any television shows or offer my opinion in any way, shape, or form for 3 years because I had to honor the contract, and they paid me. The whole contract, in essence, silenced me. Pretty interesting, huh?
And Mike and I are students of this war on drugs. Mike especially works a lot with the United Nations, and we have seen for our entire career in this stuff. The two of us have been doing this for like 30 years. It's a plan. It's executed. It's hypocritical as hell. It's full of lies and holes. It's based on opinions, not science, and it's just total bullshit. But that's just where we are.
It comes back, guys, to money. Always remember the great movie All the President's Men about Woodward and Bernstein and breaking Watergate and all that? Remember when Woodward goes down into the bowels of that parking ramp and his source deep throat tells him, follow the money? Well, 99 out of 100 times in dealing with government, follow the money and you'll get your answer. That's the answer with marijuana and cannabis too. Follow the money. Because here's the rub. You can grow it in your backyard, which means poor people wouldn't have to buy it from pharmaceutical companies. It means they wouldn't have to pay taxes to the government. I grew up in the inner city of Minneapolis, South Minneapolis, and every summer my mom would churn up a third of our little backyard, and she'd grow tomatoes, so we'd have fresh tomatoes all summer. I remembered growing up. And you could do the same thing with marijuana. You could grow it in your backyard, you could get the benefits from it, and you wouldn't have to pay anybody. That's the major rub. I'll tie it in like this, and I know this is a stretch, but hear me out. It's like prostitution. When you look at prostitution, okay, two consenting adults can meet each other on a street corner and have all the sex they want as long as they're consenting. Yet the only thing that makes it illegal is if there's an exchange of money. It isn't the sex acts that cause it to be illegal. It's the exchange of money. The government wants to be the pimp. They want to cut to the action, and that's why it's illegal. The same thing holds true with cannabis or marijuana. You could grow it in your backyard. You look at the pharmaceutical companies right now, what they did with this stuff that people need for bee stings. Did you follow that? Where they raised the price 400 times to where now it costs $500 a shot from something that cost $20 before. Well, see, that's what they have in line for marijuana. When they legalize it, they want the Anheuser-Busch companies. They want the big cigarette companies to run the whole thing, the corporations, and they want to deny you as an individual the right to get it for free. And so that's the real rub.
Wait a minute. Well, I agree with you, Governor, on that. By the way, the University of Mississippi, where the U.S. government has their federal pot grown for the patients that I work with, costs them about $2.50 an ounce to grow it. But my thought is you're absolutely right on the money, but isn't the money now changing? With all of these states going legal or medical, we have new jobs. We have another part of the medical industry getting educated on the use of the cannabis. There's laboratories, and the taxes that are being collected are enormous. And then, of course, we can go to law enforcement. Everything's down. In the legal states like Washington and Colorado, violent crime is down, DUIs are down, suicides down. So maybe the money's going the other way. Am I right? Well, am I wrong?
Yeah, it certainly is locally at the states, and that's where the legalization will take place like it is. You're not going to see that the only way this is going to be legalized is for people like you and people like me and all of us to be vigilant. We got to keep the heat on. And as each state passes it, pretty soon what will the federal government do when all 50 states have declared it legal? Then they will have to go along with it.
Ridiculous,
you know,
look ridiculous.
This is the issue that could bring people to rise up. You know, people in this country want a revolution. You saw the Sanders people, you see the Trump people. Believe it or not, they want the same thing, only they're from both sides of the spectrum, so they'll never get together on it. But the point is, people want to get control, and marijuana could be the issue, because over half the people want full legalization now, and it's the federal government that's being our parent. It's the federal government telling us we know what's best for you. And this is a chance for us to rise up and tell the federal government this, that we are in charge and that they work for us, not the other way around. And this could be the key issue that could bring back our country to its people, to where the people are back in charge and not the bureaucrats in Washington.
Yeah, how's that look to you? What's your future picture? What would the government's dropping their prohibition of cannabis? What would you see? Sort of an ABC store type thing, as well?
Well, no, you see it. You see it being treated identical to alcohol and tobacco. Treat it the same way. It's like people ask me at book signings, well, wait a minute, Governor, what do I do if it's legalized and I catch my 12 or 13-year-old son with marijuana? You know what I say to him? I tell him a simple answer, parent. I said, treat it the same way if you caught your kid with tobacco or at age 13, and if you caught your kid with alcohol at age 13, or any of them. Treat it the same way. Be a parent. And if you parent, your kids won't have a problem with it.
Well, I agree there. Mike, you got a question for the governor?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking at kind of a contradiction, and I wonder if you could help us all kind of think through this. As you were describing earlier, Governor, the price of cannabis drops precipitously if you compare the products that you were talking about for like epileptic seizures, for being $600 a month in Minnesota, but only $30 in Colorado. But yet we have a lot of resistance, even amongst our veteran friends, like out in California, to legalization, with the thought being that if they legalize it and they tax it, it's going to raise the price. So how does that work in your mind?
No, I don't think it would raise the price, because the more you get out there drives the price down. the easier accessibility to it drives the price down. And like I said, if they do legitimate legalization, poor people can grow it in their backyard. They don't need to pay nobody. And that'll certainly drive the price down, won't it?
And for those who do buy it,
I disagree. I don't think you're going to see the price goes up with prohibition. It goes way up with prohibition. When you prohibit something, then they can charge 10 times more for it because it's illegal. But the minute it's brought above board, put it this way, do you see anybody out there committing crimes to get alcohol or tobacco? No. There's your answer right there. You don't have to, anybody can scrounge up enough money to get a bottle of wine, or you can go on the street corner and bum cigarettes and you'll probably get them. You know, I love to tell the story. You want to hear a funny story? I remember in the wrestling days, we were in San Francisco, and I was with Bobby the Brain Heenan at the time and a few of us, and we were going out to dinner after the matches, and we were going to this specific restaurant in Frisco, and as we were walking in, there was a bum there that was bumming a cigarette, and I'll never forget Bobby, who smoked, pulled out his pack. He saw he had 4 or 5, so he hands the guy the whole pack. He says, "Here, take the pack, I'll get another one." So we go inside and we eat for an hour. We come back out and the same bum is waiting for us. And when we walk out the door, he walks back up to Bobby Heenan, hands him back the pack of cigarettes, and he goes, "They're menthol." In other words, I mean, you had to laugh. He waited out there. You give the guy credit for being honorable. He bummed the cigarettes. Yeah. They weren't his brand. They were menthol, so he waited a whole hour just to return them. There's a guy with honor. But it also kills that thought of beggars can be choosy, I guess.
Can I go back to your original? Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead.
Well, again, it's a case of if it's made legal and if it's available, the price will go down. It will not go up. It will go way down.
Not only that, I'm a student lately of Washington State, where Veterans for Compassionate Care, the company that I run, is located actually in Spokane. And we're going to use cannabis, Governor, as an exit agent, if you will, from opiates, pharmaceuticals, alcohol, nicotine, whatever a veteran may be having a problem with. They'll come into a health arrangement that will include all of the standard modern technologies dealing with addiction and things like that, but it will also have one of the main parts of the program, the protocol, will be the use of cannabis.
What we need to do, too, is re-educate people on addiction. You know, people get very frightened of addiction. Well, wait, people get very frightened when they hear the word addiction. And they should understand that addiction is a disease, that addiction needs to be treated medically, and yet we seem to insist upon treating it criminally. People can be addicted to many things. Take a look. Imagine, let's do a hypothetical here for a moment. Imagine if tomorrow morning you could make all the Starbucks and coffee in the United States disappear and people couldn't get their caffeine fix. What do you think would happen? You'd have chaos.
You'd be breaking in.
You'd have anarchy. You'd have people getting killed over a cup of coffee. See, that you got to bring it into terms that people understand. And when you bring up the fact how many people cannot get up and start their day without their caffeine fix. Well, the same holds true for obese people and food. They're addicted to food. Obesity is a huge problem today. Obesity can be cured. All it takes is willpower, a little bit of exercise, and eat right, and you won't be obese. See, that's what people need to understand is addiction comes in so many different forms and so many different things, and the public, we as humans, tend to be addictive personalities. We get addicted to things. We like things. We develop mental addiction. Some things are physically addicted. Caffeine's a physical addiction. So is chewing. I was addicted to Copenhagen for 20 years. I chewed a can a day. Man, when I quit that cold turkey, one of the hardest things I ever did in my life.
Did you even think about using cannabis as help for that?
No, not at all. I had gone to the dentist, and I had what we call it a Copenhagen callus. It's like a callus in your inner lip. And my dentist was my old swimming teammate in high school, and he looked and he said, "What's that on the inside of your lip?" I proudly said, "Oh, that's my Copenhagen callus." He said, "Well, that's wonderful." He said, "Would you like me to tell you what it really is?" I said, "What is it?" He said, "It's a lesion." He said, "As long as it's benign, you're fine." He said, "If it's malignant, within 3 weeks, we'll cut a third of your face away." I drove home that day thinking about my children, not so much them, because they knew me already. But I thought, if I have grandchildren someday, I certainly don't want to be a monster and have my grandson not want to sit in my lap because I look like a monster. And so I came home that day, I threw my can of Copenhagen in the trash, and I told my wife I won't chew again, and I went through hell, because at that time the gas pumps were set up where you could pump the gas, but you had to pay inside. Remember that? Well, every time I'd go inside to pay for my gas, there'd be stacks of Copenhagen on the counter. Now, how easy is it to beat an addiction? If I were addicted to cocaine, or I were addicted to heroin, or anything like that, what would happen every time I filled up with gas if I went in and on the counter were stacks of heroin and stacks of cocaine waiting for me, just like there were stacks of Copenhagen waiting for me. And all I had to do was say, "Oh, and give me a can of Copenhagen," and I'm hooked again. But I managed not to do it, and I knew I had it beat when I could play 18 holes of golf and not load my lip.
I'm gonna make sure my son-in-law hears what you just said. He's an ex-NHL hockey player, and those guys chew all the time, and he still chews. And anyway, I'm going to let him hear your story. As I understand it from my military dentist, that lesion is caused by little glass particles that they put in the chew, and that cuts into your skin, and that allows the nicotine to have a faster area of oral mucosal area to get the nicotine into you. But I just want for my audience here, Governor, the initial patient that you talked of that had epileptic problems. Was that an adult, and was it a male or a female?
It was I won't say gender, but it was definitely an adult, not a child. And this person had no other seizures in their life, so it was a later in life epileptic disorder.
And there's no seizures.
And today, no seizures whatsoever. For 2.5 years now, not one seizure. And the person
still does.
The person takes a pill in the morning and a pill at night of marijuana with the the THC is the stuff for euphoric. What's the other stuff again? OMG or whatever it is. I don't know their initials. CBG. There you go. This person can't handle the THC, so gets completely the other, and that's what causes it to be expensive.
Okay. Well, that's a good thing. We recommend the medical experts recommend a whole plant idea, so that would have THC in it. But as you mentioned,
this person's tried it with a little THC in it and does not like it. This person likes it better with no THC. And it's working.
I just want the audience to understand that. CBD modulates THC activity. So any psychoactive activity that might be put in with the THC, what you do is you counter that activity by raising the percentage of the CBD. In some cases, we have a 10-to-1 ratio. In some cases, we have a 1-to-1 ratio. But this is all in the beginning stages, in an infancy stage of dosing for medical cannabis patients. And what we have learned is not only are different plants capable of different medical outcomes, but these ratios between the CBD, the THC, and other compounds which are active in the plant is very, very critical based on the patient. So I'm happy to hear that your patient, Governor, found something that would help them. I also just want to add to. Go ahead.
Let me just say this: it's given our quality of life back. That's how much it's helped. We had lost our complete quality of life. If you've ever had to deal with anybody that has a seizure multiple times a week, 2, 3, sometimes 4 times a week, your life ends because you have to take care of this person, and so it could happen anywhere. And so and I attribute it completely to marijuana, the savior.
Well, it seems like it. You're the witness, and we believe you. That's what this show is about, to bring on folks of credibility that have had experience like you have had, not personally, but again, as a caregiver. That's important testimony, and right now about 2.5 million people are hearing you, so thanks for the story. I just want to make a point that when you're talking about black and brown people that Mr. Anslinger and his crew and Hearst and all those guys went after, it's just a side story, but Pancho Villa, the Mexican bandit who was not so much a bandit in Mexico, took 800,000 acres of Hearst property in Mexico on which he had his pulp trees growing and never gave it back to him. So I think that might have pissed Pancho might have pissed him off a little bit.
Well, and I always like to finish with this, guys, for those that are out there that are patriotic. Remember this: the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and Betsy Ross's flag are all made out of marijuana. How can anything be more American than that? What's that?
Sails on old ironsides. The sails on old ironsides, all the rigging. Actually, the first building ever put up in San Francisco was a canvas, not a canvas building, but a sail building. They took the sails off one of the ships that brought them there and made it a lean-to kind of affair in San Francisco. That was the first place that anybody stayed out there. There was a white guy, and it was hemp.
Yep.
You couldn't. So let's do hemp. Let's do hemp for 10 minutes or so. What's hemp?
Well, hemp is simply the male plant of marijuana. And you know what's interesting about that? Back in George Washington's day, they knew the difference. Because in Washington's diary, he was very angry because he allowed his plants to cross-pollinate, so he ended up with all hemp. And he was ticked off about that. So obviously, even back then, they were using the euphoric cannabis and separating it from the hemp cannabis. You know, all hemp is simply the male plant. That's what you make paper out of. You can make wood out of it. You can make all biodiesel fuel. Willie Nelson uses it for that. It has so many usages. And here we are eradicating it. You know, we want to get off Middle Eastern oil. Well, let's start growing hemp and producing biodiesel fuel from it because it's the best provider there is. It regrows to 15 feet every summer. Nothing could be better.
And it's clean.
Yeah.
Clean fuel.
Yeah, absolutely,
well,
it is.
A couple of sidelines. Thomas Jefferson, when he was Secretary of the State in France, to just piggyback on Washington and everybody, he was a smuggler. He brought cannabis seeds back into the United States in his pouches that were not to be opened because he was a dignitary, a diplomat.
Well, I don't know if it was. I don't know if it was smuggling back then because cannabis was so wide open and marijuana growth was the economic backbone of the country. Like in the Deep South, we always think it was cotton. It wasn't cotton until they invented the cotton gin. Prior to the cotton gin, the South was growing marijuana.
Lots of it. Kentucky especially. But no, he stole those seeds. The Europeans knew what they had. They had particular strains that were particularly good, and they kept them close to the chest. They didn't sell them or give them away or let anybody have any. No, Jefferson brought them back for us or for himself. I live very close to where his home is in Charlottesville. He's still there, of course. And a number of years ago, I got a PhD buddy of mine to request that we be able to allow us to take scrapings of existing pipes that are still held there at Monticello that were Jefferson's, and they wanted to know why. And we said, because we want to see if there's any cannabis residue in there, and they said no.
Yeah, of course, they don't want to know the truth. They desire to cover it up. And here's the final thing. Guys, here's the final big thing. We're all looking at the economy right now. And for people out there, look at the jobs that are waiting to happen out there. You've got profits. This year, Colorado has $300 million new dollars to spend on the taxation of marijuana. The state of Washington has seen initially a 15% drop in their statewide judicial budget. That's huge. And the benefits, look at all the people that work in the tobacco industry. Look at all the people that work in the alcohol industry. You would have the same type or bigger employment in the hemp marijuana industry if it's made legal. It's jobs waiting to happen. It's the economy waiting to be held up again and supported by cannabis rather than us paying billions and trillions of dollars trying to stop it.
Governor, how would you handle cannabis right now? I mean, Al Byrne and I are looking at a future where they're going to have cannabis products on the battlefield that they're going to give to a trauma patient right there on the battlefield that helps reduce swelling, and they'll have cannabis products, a variety of them, for pain and seizures, as we've already seen. But now,
only if the feds legalize. Otherwise, you're not going to get any of that.
Well, that's exactly my point. I wonder what the veterans' world would have been like had cannabis not been pulled out of our world. Would we have had, VFW clubs so full of alcohol kind of related affairs, and would we have, how would our lives be so different? And I just wonder, how would you handle cannabis right now? Would you let active duty military have access to medical marijuana? Would you, have the VA handle medical marijuana? How would you handle it?
I would handle it as I said. If I had my druthers and I was the president, I would be moving to make it fully legal, and you would treat it identical as you would alcohol and tobacco. And those that, now naturally you don't want people drinking and then standing their watch in the military. You can't do that drunk. The same thing would hold true. You wouldn't want them smoking pot and then attempting to do their jobs. But that, you have to give people the benefit of the doubt. You have to give the people, I was professional enough in the military to know better. When it was time for me to operate, I didn't allow anything, just as I wouldn't drink before going on an op. I'm not going to smoke reefer before I go on an op either. I want my head clear. I want to be able to think. I want to be able to survive. And so I think just you treat it like an adult. You treat it the same way you allow tobacco, the same way you allow alcohol. And certainly veterans who come back with post-traumatic stress should have all the access in the world they want to any type of marijuana they desire to use, because they're already in trouble. And anything that can help that trouble, I consider that good.
And I just want to mention, Governor, there's one small correction that Al Byrne and I would reluctantly make to your book, is that it mentions the VA medical marijuana policy as being opposed to veterans having access. And really the way that you write it in the book, it really does apply to a lot of vets. A lot of vets and a lot of patients out there have doctors that kind of forget they're doctors and act more like cops and try to weed out the cannabis users of their flock. But we worked really hard, Al and I, and we got VA policy to recognize cannabis in the VA as just another drug that the veteran would be taking outside the VA. So if the vet is taking it under doctor's orders, it's not a failed drug test, essentially.
The point that I was making on that deal is the person that I was helping couldn't even get it initially in Minnesota. You know why? No doctors would prescribe it.
Yeah.
The person had to go to a doctor way on the other side of town who was the only one doing it. See, the doctors are owned by the pharmaceutical industry. So therefore, and to me, they're not doing their jobs. They're violating their oath, because their oath is to do no harm. And when they see someone who's harmed and they won't allow them to pursue something that could help the harm they're receiving, then the doctor should be kicked out from being a doctor. But that's the big problem here that they faced initially. Pharma told all the doctors, don't you be writing scripts for marijuana in Minnesota. And the doctors here went along with it. There's only like 1 or 2 doctors in the whole state that's doing it right now. All the rest of them won't touch it.
Is there anything we can do with policy to protect those doctors?
Well, the big thing is to put the pressure on these doctors that won't do it. and say, wait a minute, you're violating your hypocritical oath. Your oath is to do no harm. If you don't allow people to use this product, you're extending to them harm. I mean, this person in my life, where would I be today if this person were still on the 4 pharmaceutical drugs they put the person on, which didn't work? They all had horrible side effects. And today the person takes no pharmaceutical drugs, takes 2 pills of marijuana morning and night, and is seizure-free. It's as simple as that.
Well, Governor, though, look, I completely agree with you that the medical community, not so much the nursing community, but certainly the doctors of the United States have abdicated their responsibility in this regard. However, look who they've abdicated it to. Nothing disrespectful to these particular work groups, but the guys that are making our legalization laws, certainly the ones that are making our medical cannabis laws, are doctors and cops. I mean, they're lawyers and cops, not doctors and nurses. They're lawyers and cops. They don't have a scintilla of information or education in their head about medicine. Yet they're practicing medicine without a license.
And so, that's because
we're controlled.
That's because you have cowardly elected officials like Hillary Clinton. She was asked about it, and she said, well, we need to do more testing. No, we don't. That's the typical political cop-out. The testing's been done. That university in Israel knows just about everything, and they're financed by us. The doctor over there has already came out the head. I forget his name, but he's like the expert. He said it would help head trauma in the NFL. It certainly would help post-traumatic stress amongst our veterans. He went on and on and on and on with the list of all the help this drug, cannabis, marijuana can do. We don't need any more testing. What we need are politicians who have some courage and who get elected to do the right thing, not cover their own political ass.
Well, that's the answer, yeah, but wow. That's Dr. Raphael. That's Dr. Raphael Meshulam at his laboratory, and he is the grandfather of cannabis science, medical science, and has been known to be that since about 1964 when he actually isolated THC as a compound in the plant. One thing I just want to go back to Mike and the Veterans Administration's policy. I just want U.S. veterans to understand that if they live in a state where the medical cannabis law has made it legal in some regard, and they do all the proper paperwork at the state level with their doctors and whatever you got to get a fee. If you do everything that's required, you take your that information into your VA office, into your VA hospital, into your VA outpatient clinic in that legal state, and you will be treated fine. No one will call security. No one will. And if they do, you get a hold of Mike and me. But no one should call security. No one should give you anything but help in how they integrate that cannabis as part of your medical protocol in that VA facility. And that's true in every legal cannabis state, D.C., some of our territories. So we're talking here, our governor and audience, about millions and millions and millions of veterans who are able to use cannabis and use their VA facility without a problem. And again, if you have a problem,
I'd like to interject one final thing, and then I got to go. Here's what I'd like to know.
All right.
I'm a veteran, and I served 6 years honorably in the United States Navy, yet I can't even go to a veterans hospital.
Why?
I make too much money.
Yeah, you can go, but you'd have to pay for all the services as if you're on the outside.
Now, what's with that double standard? So, in other words, if you're a successful veteran, you get screwed. But if you're a homeless veteran, you can go and you have nothing, you can go out and get everything from the VA. And I know other veterans like me. We've come out of the service, we've been successful, and the bar is not very high. If you own your own home, you can't even go out there. They will deny you And they'll tell you, if your financial status were to change, please reapply. I'm outraged over that. A veteran is a veteran. Why should you be discriminated against because you happen to be a successful veteran? And I understand we need the VA for all the unsuccessful veterans, the homeless veterans, we definitely do. But I'd like to know why there's a double standard, because to me, a veteran is a veteran. And if you're a veteran, you should be allowed to go to the VA hospital, but you're not allowed if you're a successful veteran.
I agree with you, Governor. I think that you should be able to go in and get services, at least some services, without a means test. I think if I were to answer for the VA on that one, they would say that, there are certain veterans with over a certain percentage of disability. I forget what it is, approaching 100%.
You know how I'd answer it? You know how I'd answer it? Good luck, thanks for being a veteran, but we'll screw you over the minute you get out any chance we get. Because they did it to me on something else, too. When I enlisted in the Navy, they had small business loans you could get when I enlisted. Well, when I got out, 5 years later, I wanted to open a weightlifting gym, and I thought, gee, I got my VA small business loan. I went to the VA, they said, they cut out that program. I said, well, they didn't when I was in. Now imagine in the private sector. You're not allowed to do that. If you give out benefits to entice people to join and be part of something, you're grandfathered in. But not in the military. They suck you in with all these benefits, and then the minute they're done with you, they take away all the benefits and you can't get them anymore. It's false advertising.
Well, we're working more closely with the American Legion these days. We'll bring up your points when we talk to them, Governor.
Well, I'm just saying, I know me, and I have 3 or 4 other veteran friends who cannot go to the VA because we're financially stable, so we're not allowed to.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And my view is, isn't a veteran a veteran?
I am rated 100% total and permanent by the VA, which means I don't get a means test at the VA hospital. So I could actually earn, if you want to switch with me, I can switch incomes with you. Then you could have my benefits. But I do appreciate your comments so much, Governor, and a fellow vet. Al, Byrne, and I support you totally, and we know you've had a rough ride over the last few years from some vets, and we're not among those. We're very supportive of you, and really appreciate your work and your voice out there, Governor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it, and I appreciate what you're doing. Keep up the great work and keep helping those veterans, and keep working to get them the help that they need, because it is utterly ridiculous that our government will deny them something that can help them after they serve their country, and it's just absurd.
You want to have the last word?
Thank you, Governor. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, folks, that was Governor Jesse Ventura. His new book is called Marijuana Manifesto. Governor Ventura wrote this book with a lady named Jen Hobbs, and there's a forward in it by a cohort of Mike and I named Steve Cubby, who's the founder of the American Medical Marijuana Association. And Steve's a cancer survivor, and like I said, has worked for us for years. Well, Mike, we got a few more minutes.
I'm not sure that we've even broached the issue on our show of New Jersey's New Jersey activists and veterans successfully persuaded Governor Christie to sign the bill into law that allows post-traumatic stress to be added to the list of qualifying conditions under New Jersey's Medical Marijuana Act, which is very, very, many would say, overly restrictive, and is a real profound change in that small list of qualifying conditions.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I was totally surprised, but a guy like Christie signed it, but maybe... Well, we won't even understand why he did it, but he did it, and that's all that counts. And what we need, though, is we need to get post-traumatic stress in every state here, and there's a lot more to go.
Yeah, I think New York is the closest battleground. Right next door, we're still fighting to add post-traumatic stress as a qualifying condition. But I have to say, in New Jersey, I think we should take credit. The veterans really worked hard. We had a couple of vets who came in and spoke in committee hearings and had never, ever participated before. I mean, they came all the way from their house as regular citizens to participate in this process because they felt that strongly. And I think that, when the governor looked at the political landscape and saw the American Psychiatric Association was against us, but the success and the experience in the 15 states that have this qualifying condition is starting to have its own weight. And the new research that we've got coming out of Dr. Sisley's study is now under works, and they're now accepting veteran applications to be part of this landmark study where they're actually going to use whole cannabis approved by the federal government to study different strains' effect on post-traumatic stress. I think we've kind of maybe turned a bend. What do you think, Al?
Well, I hope so. I would like I say, I think it is starting to carry its own momentum. That post-traumatic stress is being recognized, and as cannabis can help that problem a lot. I think veterans, as you say, are responsible for making that known more and more every day. And I'd like all you folks out there that are vets or that know a vet or love a vet, tell them to tune into this show on Time for Hemp. It's going to be on Thursday afternoons. It'll be at about, it'll be at 1 o'clock, 1300 Pacific Standard Time. So that'd be 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 1600 on the East Coast. It's called Veterans Voices. You have co-host Michael Krawitz from Air Force veteran. Station manager, Casper Leach is an Army veteran, and I'm a Navy veteran. And my name's Al Byrne. And until next week, take care.
Love has come back for the soldier to carry him home from the fight. God forgive us for the day we lost our sight and we turned our eyes when the eagle cried.
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. The only broadcasting network dedicated to ending the global war on drugs.